I took the job because I needed to get away. That's really all it was. I had been working in a loud, airless office in the middle of a crowded city, dealing with numbers and screens and fluorescent lights that never turned off. I saw a posting online one night for a summer firewatch position in the Rockies. Solitary work, beautiful views, quiet, no phone service, no neighbors, just a wooden tower tucked into the middle of forested wilderness. I filled out the application that same night and got a call back 2 days later. A week after that, I was flown into a ranger station and then driven 2 hours up a gravel road before being handed keys and a laminated map. They pointed me to a footpath and said the tower was 3 miles in. That walk-in was the first time I realized how alone I'd be. The woods were deep and thick, stretching endlessly in every direction. It was hot and quiet except for the buzzing of insects and the occasional bird. My boots kicked up dry dust. The trail wasn't well marked, just a barely visible path through brush and pine needles. I kept turning around expecting to see the ranger's truck still waiting behind the trees, but it was gone. The tower itself was tall, creaky, made of gray wood and rusty nails. 40 feet up with a narrow staircase winding around it, the cabin on top was small but had everything I needed. A cot, a desk, a radio, shelves for food, and big glass windows on all sides. There was a little stove, a tank for rainwater, and a trapdoor in the floor that led to the stairs. I didn't mind that there was no plumbing. I was used to roughing it during childhood camping trips. I settled in quickly. I set up my books, my journal, some old photos. My job was simple. Scan the horizon with the binoculars a few times a day, look for smoke, log the weather, check in on the shortwave once every morning and evening. For the first 2 weeks, it was exactly what I hoped it would be. Peaceful. I didn't see another human being or hear a single engine. I spent my mornings with coffee and long walks down the trail, my afternoons reading or sketching what I saw from the windows. Evenings were still and beautiful, orange light stretching over the treetops, the sounds of the woods turning more active as the sun dipped below the ridges. Then one evening, right before sunset, I saw it smoke. It was thin and low, coming up from behind a patch of trees about half a mile west of the tower. I grabbed the binoculars and tried to see if it was a campfire or a lightning strike or something else, but I couldn't tell from that distance. There wasn't supposed to be anyone out here. No trails led that way. No one had checked in for a backcountry permit. I waited a few minutes, thinking maybe it would fade away, but it didn't. So I packed a small bag with water, a flashlight, and my map. I headed down the stairs and bushwhacked toward the smoke. It wasn't easy walking. Lots of low branches, soft ground, uneven rocks. The forest was quiet in a way that started to bother me. The smoke was still rising faintly, but by the time I got to the spot, the smell was stronger than the sight. It was an animal, a deer, I think, burned badly. It was lying in a small clearing, its legs twisted unnaturally, the fur curled and blackened. The fire hadn't spread. There were no scorched trees, no hot coals, just this one body in the middle of the grass. The smoke was coming from what was left of its ribcage. But what stuck with me more than the body was what was around it. A circle of boot prints, deep, fresh. They didn't lead anywhere, not into or out of the clearing. Just round and round, over and over, like someone had been walking in a loop for a long time. I turned around and hiked back faster than I came. By the time I got back to the tower, the sky was dark. I climbed the stairs, shut the trapdoor behind me, and locked it. I didn't sleep well that night. Every creak of the wood made me sit up in my cot. I didn't hear any voices, but I kept thinking about those boot prints. Who walks in circles around a burning animal in the woods? The next day was normal again, almost enough to make me think I'd imagined it. But that night, just as I was lying down, I heard something. The stairs. The stairs on the tower are loud. Old, uneven wood. You can't go up or down them without making noise. That night, I heard the stairs creak twice, then stop. I held my breath, then another creak, then silence again. I sat up and waited, barely breathing. My eyes locked on the trapdoor in the middle of the floor. Nothing. No more creaks, no knock, nothing. I stayed awake all night. The The following day, I radioed in during the morning check-in and said I thought I might have seen some signs of trespassers. The guy on the other end of the line just said to stay alert and keep logging it. No one was going to come up and check unless there was a real emergency. That night, I heard it again. The stairs. But more this time. More steps, heavier. Not fast. Just slow and steady. Up and up. I stood there frozen by the trapdoor, holding a kitchen knife I'd brought from the drawer, knowing it wouldn't matter much if someone really wanted in. The creaking stopped at the top of the stairs, right under the trapdoor. Then there was a long, dragging sound, like something being pulled across the floor below. Then nothing. I didn't open the door until daylight. When I finally looked, there was nothing on the stairs, but I noticed something strange. A scratch, fresh, maybe from a knife or something sharper, running across the door, and the wood around the trapdoor latch looked slightly darker, like something wet had touched it. I stopped walking the trails after that. I stayed in the tower during the day and kept the windows locked at night. On the third night after I saw the fire, I heard something above me. The roof of the tower is just a tin-covered ceiling, with a crawl space above it for maintenance. No one's supposed to go up there. I didn't even think you could, but I heard it soft, heavy footsteps, like someone crawling across the beams. Then a tap. Not loud, not fast. Just one tap. Then another, like fingers brushing the ceiling. I turned on every light I had. Flashlights, lanterns, everything. I pointed them at the ceiling and the corners of the room and kept them on all night. The next morning, I found a trail of boot prints in the dirt below the tower. They circled the base, then circled again. For loops, 5. Then they stopped. No trail leading in, no trail leading out. The woods had been disturbed in a perfect ring. That's when I knew someone was messing with me, not just sneaking around, not stealing, watching. The ranger station didn't answer the radio that morning. I tried again that evening. Nothing. I don't know if it was the radio itself or something else, but I was on my own now. That night, I blocked the trapdoor with the heaviest furniture I could move. The desk, the cot, the storage crates. I put a hammer next to me and didn't sleep. The footsteps came again, up the stairs, around the platform, then above me. I sat in the corner with the hammer in my lap, teeth clenched, shaking, until morning. When light finally came through the windows, I took everything I needed: water, food, a flare gun, and left. I didn't go back down the trail. I went in the other direction. I followed the slope east down the ravine, where there were no trails, but I knew the ranger road had to be miles away in that direction. I didn't stop. I kept going until my legs gave out, and then I crawled until I could walk again. I was picked up the next afternoon by a ranger patrol. They thought I'd fallen or gotten sick. I didn't say much. I didn't want to hear them say no one else had been there. I didn't want to see their faces when they heard what I saw. They sent someone to check the tower later. They said it looked fine. Just empty. Nothing unusual. No signs of break-in. No blood. Just some footprints around the base, too degraded to track, and the burnt remains of an animal found a half-mile west. I never went back. I didn't collect my last paycheck. I didn't answer follow-up calls. Sometimes I still wake up at night hearing wood creaking or that dragging sound under my bed. But I don't live near trees anymore. I don't live near anything. I just want to be somewhere I can see the ground in every direction. And when I sleep, I keep the lights on. Always. I had been working fire watch duty in the southern range of Pine Rock for 4 years. Our section had 2 towers, spaced about 6 miles apart, connected by a single dirt trail that cut through thick forest. You couldn't drive it. Too many fallen trees, tight turns, erosion. You had to hike it. My tower, Tower 9, was older. The wood groaned in the wind, and sometimes I could hear squirrels in the ceiling. Nothing dangerous, just part of the job. The other tower, Tower 10, was newer, built on a ridge across from mine. From my cabin window, I could see its silhouette through the trees during the day and, at night, its blinking signal light. Each of us rotated weekly, 7 days on, 7 days off. During the shift, the other person went into town or did repair work down at base. But when both towers were staffed, we had mandatory radio check-ins 3 times a day. Once at 7 a.m., then again at 3 p.m., and finally just after 9 p.m. Kept things consistent. Doug was the other ranger. He was an older guy, late 40s I'd say, former Army. Solid worker, didn't talk much. We'd pass each other every Sunday on the trail. Say a quick hello, swap quick notes, weather patterns, anything strange we'd seen, updates from the station. Never more than 5 minutes. Then we'd continue on. That week, I'd hiked up on a Sunday morning like normal, found the tower clean, stocked, everything in order. Doug was halfway down the trail when we crossed paths. He said nothing strange had happened during his week, though he mentioned hearing something moving in the woods a few nights in a row. He figured it was just deer or maybe a bear. Nothing worth logging. I made a mental note and kept walking. The first 3 days were uneventful. I logged a few fires out by the northern valley, distant ones well outside our range. It was dry and hot, too hot for May, and the smell of smoke traveled far. I kept my binoculars nearby and scanned the ridges often. Doug would radio in at the usual times. We never said much, just confirmed we were still alive and looking. Just protocol. Then Thursday came. 7 a.m., I made my call. Nothing. I gave it 10 minutes and tried again. Still no reply. I wasn't too worried yet. Radios go out all the time. Static, weather, dead batteries. I tried again at 3 p.m. Still nothing. I started to get a little annoyed. Skipping 2 check-ins wasn't normal, even if the radio was down. We had hand-crank chargers for backup. By 9 p.m., I sat with the radio turned all the way up. Nothing but silence. Then static. Then silence again. I didn't sleep well that night. Just after midnight, I looked out toward the other ridge. I often did that, just habit, scanning the forest. That's when I saw the light. A single flash, then a pause, then another, then 2 close together. At first I thought it was the tower light flickering, but the pattern didn't match. The tower signal was automatic, 1 long blink every 15 seconds. This was faster. It looked like someone was using a flashlight. Not random either. I counted. 1 blink, 2 blinks, pause, 1, 2, 1. I squinted hard through the trees, but I couldn't see much more. Just those small glints, like someone signaling. I stayed up almost the whole night, watching. The light kept flashing. Not constant, just every few minutes. Like it was waiting for me to notice. But I didn't flash anything back. I didn't want whoever that was to know I'd seen it. The next morning, I made the hike. I left at 6 a.m. sharp. It was already warm and humid, and the trail was soft in places. The woods felt too quiet. No wind, barely any bird calls. Even the insects seemed quiet. I walked slow, checking for tracks, broken branches, anything out of place. The forest was thick on either side, heavy with green and wet moss. By the time I got near the base of Tower 10, I noticed something off. Usually Doug would have a kettle going or be outside splitting wood. The place was silent. No smoke from the chimney, no sound at all. I called out once, just loud enough to announce myself. Nothing. I climbed the stairs. The door to the cabin at the top was unlocked. That's when I really started to feel weird. Doug was a stickler about locking the hatch. Inside, it looked normal at first. Clean, organized, coffee mug on the table, bed made. His pack was leaning against the wall, but unzipped. I looked inside. Still had his sleeping bag, stove, even his flashlight. His boots were missing though. That didn't make sense. I looked around again, slower this time. That's when I noticed the mud. Wet boot prints. 1 set, coming in through the hatch. No other prints, just that 1 line of muddy steps. Came from the outside and ended near the desk. I followed the line with my eyes. Then I looked out the window. Down below, the dirt around the base of the stairs was disturbed, like someone had stood there for a while. Then I saw the trail, faint prints coming from the woods. Not the trail I came from. These came from the backside, place with no trail at all. Thick, rough terrain. People didn't come from that way, not unless they were trying not to be seen. I climbed down and walked a short loop around the base. The prints circled the tower once, then disappeared back into the tree line. I followed them for maybe 50 feet before they vanished in the thick brush. The ground was soft but spotty, and the sun was already drying it up. But I could tell one thing for sure. They were the same boot treads as Doug's. Same exact kind of soles. Same wear pattern. One toe slightly dragged, just like I remembered when we passed each other on Sunday. But if the boots were here, inside the tower, and the prints went to and from the woods, then who the hell was wearing them? I searched the tower again, top to bottom. Nothing. No sign of a struggle. No torn fabric. No blood. His pack was untouched. No radio damage. Everything looked normal, except that he was gone, and the boots weren't on his feet. I hiked back in silence. Didn't bother calling over the radio. I already knew it wouldn't work. When I got back to my tower, I sat down and wrote everything I saw in the logbook. Every small detail. Then I locked all the doors, pulled the blinds, and waited. That night, just after midnight, I saw the flashing again. Same pattern. 1, 2, pause. 1, 2, 1. It was coming from somewhere lower than the tower now. Not quite the ridge, like someone was halfway down the slope. Closer. The next morning, I radioed base and requested a pickup. Told them Doug had missed 3 check-ins and wasn't at his post. They said they'd send someone out in 2 days. Said the roads were washed out and the trail had a few downed trees. I didn't argue. I kept the tower locked until they arrived. The lights kept flashing each night. Always around midnight. Never random. Always that same strange rhythm. When the relief team finally came, I hiked down and didn't look back. I told them everything. They said they'd investigate and radio me once they had news. That was 4 weeks ago. They never found Doug. Not a single trace. But I keep thinking about those muddy prints. The ones that came out of the woods and walked straight into the tower. And the ones that went right back in. I know what I saw. I know the boots were inside. But I don't know who or what walked them back out. We parked on the side of the gravel road just after noon. The sign was old, nailed to a cracked post that leaned slightly toward the trees. It read "Trail Closed" in faded red paint, but someone had spray painted a thin line through the words. Dylan had found a forum online weeks ago where people talked about a hidden waterfall deep in these woods. Off-trail, not on any maps. They said it was beautiful and untouched, but the trail leading there had been closed for years. That didn't stop us. There were 5 of us. Dylan, always the one pushing the boundaries, led the way with a printed satellite map folded in his pocket. Nate and Zoe were behind him, always together. I walked a few steps behind them with Lily, who kept pulling her sleeves over her hands, nervous from the start. It was hot, humid, and the forest was dense. The further we went, the less it felt like a trail. At first, the path was clear, just overgrown from lack of use. Grass reaching up to our knees, low branches brushing our faces. But soon it narrowed. Fallen logs blocked the way, and the underbrush grew thick. You had to step carefully to avoid holes and uneven ground. We were sweating within 20 minutes, biting insects swarming us. The air smelled like damp soil and pine. We passed old markers now and then, wooden stakes with yellow ribbon, cracked and sun-bleached. None of us knew if they were official or not. Dylan checked the map often, saying we were close, just a little further. The canopy above us thickened, the light barely reaching the forest floor. The only sound was our boots crunching leaves and the constant buzz of insects. After maybe 2 hours of hiking, things changed. It started with something small. Nate tripped over a thin wire strung low between 2 trees. He caught himself on a branch, muttering under his breath, but we all saw it. A tripwire. Not natural. Someone had put it there on purpose. We all froze. The forest suddenly felt too quiet. We stood in a loose circle, scanning the woods. There was no movement, no sound but the wind. Dylan tried to brush it off, probably some hunter's trap from years ago, but none of us believed that. The wire was clean, taut, new. We moved slower after that, eyes on the ground, on the trees. Another 30 minutes in, we found a set of sharpened sticks set in a shallow pit, leaves piled over the top. Crude but dangerous. The points were darkened at the tips, burnt or stained. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't abandoned. Someone had built it with care. And recently, then came the warnings. Little things, pieces of bark with crude shapes carved into them, stick figures with X's for eyes. A branch hung low across the trail with a strip of cloth tied to the end, stained dark. Rocks stacked in weird, unnatural piles beside the path. A tree with its bark stripped in a wide vertical line, as if something had been dragged against it. We didn't speak. We just kept moving. No one laughed anymore. Zoe started glancing behind us every couple steps. Lily didn't even try to hide her fear, and I kept thinking about how far we had come, how easy it would be to get turned around if we had to rush back. The woods were endless in every direction. Everything looked the same. Around 4 in the afternoon, we stopped for water near a shallow stream. Our clothes were soaked in sweat. There were no signs of the waterfall, no sound of rushing water. Dylan admitted we might have gone off course a little. The map didn't show this stream. That's when I noticed it. Across the stream, in the tree line, something moved. Not an animal. It was slow, careful, not crashing through the brush like a deer would. More like someone stepping deliberately, staying just out of view. I didn't tell the others. I didn't need to. Zoe noticed it too. I saw her eyes go wide, fixed on the same spot. We left the stream without resting. No one complained. From that point on, the forest didn't feel empty anymore. There was a weight to it. I could feel eyes on us. Every twig snap made us flinch. We tried to walk faster, but we didn't know where we were going anymore. Dylan stopped checking the map. He just pushed forward, pretending to know the way. As the sun started to dip, we found another warning, this one clearer than the rest. A large X made of branches, tied together with twine, stuck in the ground like a signpost. Below it, in the dirt, someone had carved a message with a stick or knife. Turn back. The ground around it was disturbed. Footprints, too many to count, all human. We turned around then. No one said a word. It just happened like we all agreed without speaking. Our steps were faster, careless. We weren't looking for traps anymore, we just wanted out. But the way back didn't feel right. We passed things we didn't remember, trees that looked unfamiliar, logs we hadn't climbed over before. It was like the forest had shifted behind us. Lily tripped on something and hit the ground hard. When I helped her up, her knee was cut open. Not just scraped, sliced. We found what did it. A small, rusted metal edge sticking out of the ground, half buried. Someone had set it there, low and hidden. We were being funneled. That was the word that came to mind. Herded like animals. Every time we tried to go a new direction, we ran into more signs, wires, stakes, even a small stack of bones laid out neatly on a log. Not human bones, but cleaned, arranged. A warning. It was almost dark now. The sky turned orange between the trees, and long shadows crawled across the ground. We were walking in silence, too tired to talk. Then Zoe stopped suddenly, pointing to a ridge up ahead. At the top, just for a second, I saw him. A figure, human, standing still, watching. He wasn't close, maybe 60 yards, but clear enough to make out. He wore something like camouflage or rags. Couldn't see a face. And then he stepped backward, disappeared into the trees like he'd never been there. We didn't chase. We didn't yell. We just kept moving even faster. By the time full dark hit, we were walking with our phone flashlights, trying not to blind each other. Every shadow felt like it was moving. Every sound felt like it was following us. Then finally we saw the road. I don't know how we found it. Maybe we circled back. Maybe we got lucky. But we came out near the car, stumbling out of the woods like we'd been spit out. We didn't stop. We just got in, slammed the doors, and Dylan drove like hell, headlights bouncing off the trees. No one said a thing until we were halfway back to town. We never reported it. What would we say? That we trespassed on a closed trail and someone didn't like it? That there's someone out there living in those woods, building traps and leaving warnings? Who would believe that? We never went back. The map got deleted. The forum thread disappeared a few weeks later, probably removed by a mod, or maybe something else. But I still think about those traps, the precision of them, the patience, and that figure at the top of the ridge. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He stood still and he watched us leave. I had taken off work for a week just to get away from everything. No people, no cars, no buzzing phone. I picked a spot deep in the national forest, farther out than I'd ever gone before. It wasn't an official campsite, just a clearing near a stream about 9 miles from the nearest marked trail. I packed light but smart. Tent, knife, fire-starting gear, water purifier, bare canister for food, all of it. I made sure I could handle a few days completely alone. That was the whole point. The first 2 days were peaceful. Mornings were quiet, the kind of quiet where you hear nothing but birds, insects, and the trees creaking if the wind was strong enough. I fished a bit, made small fires in the evenings, and mostly just sat around thinking about nothing. I didn't see another person, didn't hear a plane, just me and the woods. The third night, something strange happened. After I put out my fire, just like I always did before going into the tent, I was laying in my sleeping bag with the mesh window open for air. That's when I heard it. A whistle, faint, broken, like someone trying to play a tune they didn't fully remember. I couldn't tell where it was coming from. It echoed off the trees. At first I thought it might be the wind, but it wasn't that kind of sound. It wasn't natural. It was deliberate. I sat up for a while listening. I kept telling myself it was another camper, maybe a mile or two off. Sound can travel weird in the forest. I knew that. I had read stories of people hearing voices from halfway across the valley. I tried to ignore it, but the fact that it started after I had put the fire out, that stuck with me. It lasted for maybe 5 minutes, then stopped all at once. The next day I explored a little farther upstream, climbed a ridge to get a view of the area. No tents, no smoke, nothing. If someone else was out there, they were being real quiet about it. I didn't see any tracks either. Just deer, some raccoon prints, and maybe a coyote. But no boot marks. I shook it off. Told myself not to overthink it. Night 4, same thing. As soon as I doused the fire and zipped myself into the tent, it started again. The same broken whistling. It was the same tune, or almost the same, but this time it was closer. Not close enough to pinpoint, but definitely nearer than before. I stayed still, breathing shallow. I had my knife next to me, but what was I gonna do? Go out looking for whoever was doing it? Risk getting lost or hurt? It stopped again after a few minutes, but this time I didn't sleep well. Every little twig snap outside made me flinch. I started to wonder if someone was watching me. It didn't feel like an animal. Animals don't whistle. And even if it was a person, why would they be doing that every night? Why wait for the fire to go out? Why get closer? By the 5th night, I was on edge. I thought about packing up and heading back to the truck, but I had hiked in so far, and there was a part of me that didn't want to admit I was getting scared. I stayed up later than usual, sat by the fire longer. It was around midnight when I finally put the fire out. I sat there in the dark for a while, just to see if it would start again. It did, but this time it started barely a minute after the fire died. I couldn't lie to myself anymore. Whoever it was, they were watching, waiting. It was the same broken tune, but now it was even closer. I could tell it was coming from downhill, toward the trees on the edge of the clearing. My clearing. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe heavy. Just listened, staring out into the dark like I'd be able to see anything. It lasted longer this time. Maybe 10 minutes. Then it faded. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, I looked for signs again. Walked the edge of the woods. Checked the trail behind me. Nothing. No boot prints, no dropped gear. Whoever was doing it was careful. Or they knew how to move through the woods without leaving a trace. And that thought made it worse. I was dealing with someone who wanted to stay hidden. I spent the whole 6th day uneasy. Kept looking over my shoulder. started hearing little things. Twigs snapping, the hush of branches brushing together, and I couldn't tell what was real anymore. Everything felt off. I told myself I'd leave the next morning, just hike straight out and get to the truck by sundown. But when the sun dipped again, I was stuck. No way was I gonna hike at night through the woods with whoever or whatever was out there. That night, I skipped the fire. I didn't want to give them a signal. I ate a cold dinner, stayed in the tent early, and kept the knife gripped tight in my hand. Hours passed. It was quiet for a long time, so quiet it made my ears ring. I started to think maybe they gave up. Maybe they moved on. Then I heard it, but not the whistle. Breathing, soft, steady, right outside the tent wall. Not moving, just there. It was the kind of breathing you don't hear unless everything else is dead silent. I didn't dare move, didn't make a sound. I lay there frozen, heart hammering so loud I was sure they could hear it. It went on for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. No footsteps, no talking, just slow, steady breathing inches away from my head. The tent fabric was thin. I could have reached out and touched whoever it was, or they could have reached in, but they didn't. Eventually, the breathing stopped. Not all at once. It just slowly faded as if the person, whoever they were, backed away into the woods. I waited another hour before I even sat up. I stayed awake the rest of the night with my knife across my lap, facing the door of the tent. I didn't hear the whistling again. At dawn, I packed up everything fast. Didn't eat. Didn't even filter more water. I just shoved everything into my pack, tore down the tent, and started hiking. I didn't stop, not even to rest. I made it back to the truck by early afternoon. My legs were cramping and I was lightheaded from not eating, but I didn't care. I just got in and drove. I don't know who it was. I never saw them. I never heard that whistle again after I left that forest. But I do know this, it wasn't some casual hiker or harmless camper. They knew what they were doing. They stayed just far enough away to keep me unsure, kept the pressure on until I was too scared to think straight. And when they finally came close, they didn't do anything. They just let me know they could. That was enough. I haven't gone camping since. We hiked in late on a Thursday afternoon, deeper into the woods than we'd ever been before. Me and Nate had planned this trip for weeks, both of us wanting to get away from everything for a while. Work, people, traffic, noise. Nate had found this spot marked on an old trail map, a little hollow surrounded by thick pine and oak, about 5 miles off any marked trail. We had to cut through brush and even wade through a shallow creek to get there. It was tucked so far into the woods we figured no one else would even know about it. That was part of the draw. We reached it a little before sunset, tired, sweaty, and covered in tiny scratches from the undergrowth. The clearing was perfect. Flat, soft earth, a ring of trees all around, and a fire pit someone must have made years ago with big smooth stones. No signs of recent use, no trash, no footprints, just a quiet stillness and the smell of pine sap and moss. We set up our tents near the edge of the clearing, a few feet apart. His was green, mine was gray. We gathered wood, started a fire, cooked some Ken stuff on a little burner, and talked about nothing. That first night, everything felt calm, peaceful even. It got cold after dark, and we zipped up in our tents and listened to the soft wind in the trees until we fell asleep. The next morning, when I crawled out of my tent and stretched, I noticed it immediately. A bright blue tent, about 20 feet away from ours. Small, maybe for one person. I froze for a second, blinking at it. It hadn't been there yesterday when we arrived. I was sure of it. Nate was already up, crouched by the fire pit making coffee. I looked at him, then back at the tent. It just sat there, zipped shut. No sound, no movement. We waited for a while that morning, kept expecting someone to come out. But no one did. After an hour, we stopped paying attention to it. Maybe someone had arrived in the middle of the night and set up quietly, though we hadn't heard anything. We tried not to let it bother us, but both of us kept glancing at it throughout the day. It just seemed off. Not threatening exactly, just strange. That night, we sat around the fire and drank a couple of beers, talking about old memories, girls we dated, dumb stuff from high school. Every once in a while, I'd look over at the blue tent. No light inside, no rustling, nothing, just that silent blue shape sitting in the dark. The next morning, we noticed Nate's pack had been unzipped. Some of his food was missing: granola bars, jerky, a can of beans. At first, we thought maybe he'd forgotten that he'd eaten it or misplaced it. But later I realized a pair of my socks was gone too. They'd been drying on a low branch by my tent. We joked that maybe some raccoons had figured out how zippers worked. But it wasn't funny. The blue tent didn't have any fire smoke or footprints around it. Still no signs of life. Still zipped shut. We hadn't seen or heard anyone since we got there. The third night, I barely slept. Every crack of a twig made me sit up. I kept thinking about someone slipping into our sight while we were asleep, moving around quietly, taking things. We didn't keep anything valuable out. Just food, clothes, gear. But it was the idea of someone creeping that close to us in the dark that unsettled me. By the next morning, both of our flashlights were dead. They'd had fresh batteries when we arrived. I checked and saw the backs had been twisted off and the batteries gone. We hadn't heard anything in the night. No footsteps, no tent zippers, nothing, just gone. I felt sick with unease, like we were being watched. But the woods were so still, so quiet. There were no birds chirping, no wind, just silence. That's when Nate said we should open the blue tent. Just see. He said it like he didn't want to, but needed to. I agreed. I had to know. We walked up to it slowly. The flap was still shut. I could see the zipper pull was halfway down, like it had been used. I reached out and grabbed it. My fingers were shaking. I slowly unzipped the flap and pulled it open. It was empty. No sleeping bag, no pillow, no clothes, just bare tent floor. But someone had been staying there. The inside smelled like old sweat and dirty fabric. There were faint marks in the thin dirt on the floor, where someone had been lying. Small trash in the corners, an empty water bottle, a torn piece of granola bar wrapper, a single-used sock. No ID, no name tag, nothing to say who. But worse than that was what we found just behind the tent, in the underbrush. Nate stepped around back and called me over. I followed, pushing through low branches. Tucked into a small hollow in the ground behind the tent was a pile, a hidden stash. Our missing stuff was there. My socks, crumpled up, Nate's food wrappers, our flashlight batteries. But there were other things too. Old wrappers, more socks, other people's stuff, a ripped shirt, plastic comb, pocket knife. Some looked older, weather-worn. Some looked recent, not ours. It wasn't just our things that had been taken. Someone had done this before, and maybe was still doing it. That was when the fear really settled in. Whoever was living here, whoever had set up that tent and then vanished, had been stealing from people who camped in this area, hiding their trail, staying silent, watching. I looked around at the woods, thick and still, and suddenly I could feel eyes on us, though I couldn't see a thing. The trees were too dense, shadows everywhere. We didn't talk. We packed up everything, fast. I didn't even finish rolling up my tent. I just shoved it into my pack. We didn't stop for food or water. We just walked. For hours. I kept turning around, thinking I heard something behind us, but it was always nothing. Just branches, leaves, the occasional squirrel darting through. We finally reached the creek by late afternoon, crossed it without stopping, and kept moving until we hit the rough ATV path we'd used to get in. We didn't stop walking until we were back at Nate's truck, just before dark. My legs were sore, feet blistered, throat dry, but I didn't care. I felt safe again, at least a little, once we shut the truck doors. We drove the whole way back in silence. Neither of us knew what to say. There was no one to report it to. We hadn't seen a crime, technically, just some stolen food. But we both knew someone was out there, someone who didn't want to be found, who moved at night, who didn't light fires or make sound, someone who watched and waited until campers were asleep. I've camped a lot in my life, still do sometimes, but never without checking the woods around me in every direction. Never without making sure I'm not being watched. And I never go as deep into the woods as we did that weekend. Because somewhere out there, there's someone who knows how to disappear in plain sight, who lives just on the edge of your campfire's glow. Quiet, patient, careful. Someone who never speaks, never shows their face, and only takes just enough that you don't notice until it's too late. But they're there. You can't hear them, but they're there. I had been out on the trail for 6 days. Just me, my pack, and the dirt under my boots. I needed the break. The stress back home had been piling up for months. Work deadlines, family stuff, bills, all of it. I planned this solo trip because I wanted silence. I wanted time to walk, sweat, eat freeze-dried food, and sleep under the stars. And that's what I got. The trail was remote. No cell service. No other hikers. I parked at a small dirt lot off an old forest road, shouldered my gear, and started my loop. It took me deep through thick forest, rocky switchbacks, long ridgelines, and wet valleys. I kept to myself, took photos, filled my journal, stayed on trail. I didn't see another person the whole time. That's part of why I picked it. By the 5th night, I started feeling ready to go home. I was tired, sore, and craving real food. The last day was the longest stretch, almost 16 miles to get back to the trailhead. I woke up before the sun, packed my camp fast, and started walking in the blue light of early morning. The air smelled like pine and wet moss. I moved quickly, keeping my head down, counting miles in my head. I only stopped once to eat a protein bar near a little creek. I didn't hear anything out of place, just birds and wind and the soft sound of water moving over rocks. But looking back now, I think maybe I did feel something off. I ignored it at the time. You do that when you're tired. You push through it. When I came around the last bend and saw the trailhead parking lot, my first thought was relief. I saw my car parked where I left it. A green Subaru Outback, dusty but fine. But as I got closer, I saw the man. He was sitting on the hood of my car, elbows on his knees, head slightly down, but he wasn't asleep. He was watching me. I slowed down without realizing it. His clothes were dark, maybe a black or navy jacket and some kind of cargo pants. He had boots on, real hiking boots, not cheap sneakers. His hair was long, dark, and greasy looking, almost covering his eyes, but not quite. His skin was pale and his face didn't show anything. No expression, just watching. I stopped about 20 feet from my car. My shoulders were aching under my pack. My throat was dry. I didn't say anything. Neither did he. He just sat there, staring. Still, I didn't know what to do. There was no one else around. No other cars. The nearest real road was almost 8 miles down a bumpy dirt track. No signal out here. I looked down at my phone anyway, no bars as expected. I kept it in my hand, just in case. I thought maybe he was lost, or crazy, or maybe waiting for someone else and just picked my car to sit on. But it didn't feel like that. There was something too still about him. Like he wasn't just sitting, he was waiting. For me. I called out, asking if he needed help, but he didn't answer. He didn't move. I stayed where I was a little longer, then slowly walked toward the driver's side door. My key was in my hip pocket. I kept glancing at him. No change. When I got to the door, I looked down. My tires were flat, all 4 of them. I crouched beside the front one. Sliced, clean, straight through the sidewall. Not blown from wear, cut. I looked at the others. Same thing, for slashed tires. I stood up fast, my chest tightening. The man still didn't move, just looked at me. I took a few steps back, then turned and started walking. Not toward him, back up the trail. I didn't know what else to do. There was no signal, no other people, no radio in the car. I figured maybe if I hiked far enough, I'd get a bar of service, maybe find another hiker or a road crew or something. I walked fast, almost jogged. I kept looking back over my shoulder every few minutes. After about 20 minutes, I stopped and crouched behind a tree, waited. I couldn't hear anything, but when I peeked around the trunk, I saw him. He was walking up the trail, not fast, not running, just walking the same way I came, same pace I was using, calm, like he had all the time in the world. I stood up and started moving again, faster this time. I was sweating, even though the sun hadn't fully risen. My legs were tired from the long day, but I forced them to keep going. I started cutting off the trail, angling through the woods. I figured maybe I could lose him that way. Loop around, get back to the car, and lock myself inside. Maybe even sleep there until someone drove past in the morning. But he kept showing up. It didn't make sense. I cut left through dense trees, climbed a rocky ridge, crossed a stream, and waited. I didn't see him. I waited 15 minutes. Nothing. Then I moved again, heading east, away from the trail entirely. I stopped again after maybe another mile. I sat behind a big fallen log, drank some water, tried my phone. Still no signal. I stayed there almost an hour. It was completely silent. Not even birds now. Then I heard the crunch of dry pine needles behind me. I didn't look. I just got up and ran. I left my water bottle behind. I didn't care. My backpack bounced hard against my shoulders. I ran through thorns, tripped once, got back up, kept running. My lungs were burning. My shirt was soaked with sweat. My legs didn't want to keep going, but I forced them. Finally, I came to a low clearing, an old trail or maybe a logging road. I followed it, hoping it would lead to something, anything. It curved downhill, winding through a shallow valley. That's when I saw the cabin. It was small, probably one room, old, with peeling wood, broken windows, and a rusted-out chimney. I didn't care. I ran straight to it, yanked the door open. It was barely hanging on the hinges, and went inside. It was empty, just a rotted wooden table and a crushed metal chair. The floor sagged under my weight. I crouched behind the table and tried my phone again. Still no signal. I stayed there, barely breathing, heart pounding, ears tuned to every little sound outside. I waited until the sun started to set, the light coming in through the broken windows turning gold and low. I thought maybe he had lost me. Maybe I could make it through the night, then hike out in the morning. But just as the last light was going, I heard the door creak open. It was slow, a small sound, not forced, not rushed, just opened. I didn't move. I stayed as still as I could behind the table. I could hear breathing, heavy, steady, just inside the doorway. Then footsteps on the soft wood. They came halfway in, then stopped. He didn't say anything. I didn't either. The light faded completely. I stayed in the dark, knees pulled to my chest, waiting. Hours passed. I could still hear him breathing. Then eventually, nothing. I must have fallen asleep. When I woke up, it was morning. The cabin was empty. He was gone. I stepped outside. Everything was quiet. No tracks in the dirt. I didn't know where he went or how he moved so quietly or what he wanted. I walked for almost 6 hours before I found signal again. I didn't go back to the car. I called for help, gave them the coordinates, and waited. A ranger showed up a few hours later in a side-by-side. He didn't see anyone on the way in. When we got back to my car, it was untouched. Tires still slashed, but no sign of the man. They towed me out. I filed a report. The ranger said maybe it was a drifter or someone living off-grid. Maybe, but the way he followed me, calm, patient, no mistakes, it didn't feel like a maybe. Felt like a plan. I haven't hiked alone since. I went out into the woods that morning without any real reason. I wasn't planning to camp or hike. I just needed a break from everything: work, noise, people. I lived in a small town, and about 7 miles out there was a patch of forest that not many people went to. There were no trail signs, no benches, no maintained paths. Just old trees, patches of brambles, and soft ground covered with pine needles. I'd only ever gone a couple 100 feet in, but that morning, I decided I was going to walk deeper than usual. I wanted to feel like I had gone somewhere that no one else had been for a long time. It wasn't even cloudy or creepy when I went. It was bright, quiet, and still. No wind, just hot and dry, with the sun shining straight down through the gaps in the canopy. I didn't bring much, just a small backpack with a water bottle, a folding knife I always carried, and a granola bar. I left my phone in the truck. That was stupid, but at the time it made sense. I didn't want distractions. I locked up the truck, tossed the keys into my backpack, and stepped off the edge of the gravel pull-off into the trees. The first hour was calm. Felt like what I wanted. Quiet. The only noises were birds up high and the sound of my own boots pressing into the dry pine needles. I wasn't following a trail. I just kept moving forward in a general direction, stepping around stumps and pushing past low branches. A couple of times I stopped and listened, just to take in the stillness. It felt clean, like the kind of silence you don't get near roads or towns. But somewhere around an hour and a half in, I realized I hadn't paid attention to my direction at all. The forest looked the same everywhere I turned. Same trees, same kind of undergrowth, same patches of fern and moss. I didn't feel worried right then, but I did take a moment to try and figure out where the sun was. It was high overhead, not leaning in any obvious direction. I figured if I turned around and started walking straight back, I'd eventually hit the road. That's when I started to notice small things that didn't sit right. First, there were no animals. I hadn't seen any deer or squirrels the whole time, not even a rabbit. That felt strange. There were birds early on, but now even they were gone. I stopped again and listened. Nothing. Just that heavy, dry kind of silence, the kind where your own breathing sounds loud. I looked behind me, trying to see my own tracks. Couldn't. The pine needles were thick and soft and didn't hold much of a print. I started walking again, slower now, trying to remember if I had passed any distinct features on the way in. Large rocks, dead trees, anything. But there was nothing. Everything looked the same. I kept walking in what I thought was the direction back. Maybe 30 minutes passed, then an hour. I didn't come out near the road. Instead, the trees got a little denser. The ferns got thicker. I stepped around a fallen log and paused. That's when I saw the pile. It looked like a campfire pit at first. Just a round clearing with blackened, burned pieces of wood in the center. But there was no ring of stones, and the wood was too large, like logs stacked crisscrossed in a rough pile. There was ash all around the ground, but what made it feel wrong wasn't the wood. It was what was caught between the logs. Scraps of cloth, burned, torn pieces of something once white or pale blue. I crouched a little closer. It wasn't just fabric. I could see melted plastic, a corner of something that looked like the side of a backpack, part of a rubber sole. I stood up fast. My hands were sweating even though the air was dry. The heat of the sun felt hotter all of a sudden. I backed away from the pile and tried to walk faster, not running but almost. I didn't know what I had just seen, but it was too clean to be old. The ash hadn't been rained on. The ground wasn't damp or overgrown with moss. Someone had been there, maybe recently. I kept walking. Then I noticed something else. The thin cord. It was stretched between two trees at about ankle height, almost invisible unless the sun hit it at just the right angle. I froze, followed it with my eyes. It ran to a small piece of metal stuck into the bark of one tree. I didn't know what it was at the time, but it looked like the kind of thing you'd attach a motion sensor to. Not a hunting snare, something different, more like a tripwire. I didn't touch it. I stepped over it slowly and kept moving, eyes on the ground. The quiet was worse now. Every crack of a twig under my boots sounded too loud. I stopped again maybe 15 minutes later. My legs were starting to ache. I drank some of my water and sat on a low rock. That's when I noticed something even worse. Pair of boot prints. Not mine. Too wide. The sole pattern was different, thicker, like work boots or military boots. The heel had a square pattern that I didn't recognize, and they were deeper, like the person was heavier or carrying gear. They were fresh, edges still sharp in the dirt. They led past where I was sitting, heading in the direction I had just come from. I stared at them for a long time. Then I looked behind me and saw more. A second set, maybe 20 feet back, near a patch of ferns. They were older, partly covered in needles, but still visible. Not like a trail, more like someone had stood in one spot for a while, then moved. I started walking again. I moved fast, didn't care about stepping on things now. I just wanted out. I turned in a direction I hadn't tried before, thinking maybe if I angled to the left a bit, I'd run into the road. I kept going for what felt like an hour. Still trees. Still no sign of anything human except those prints. Then I found the shack. It wasn't big. Just a square building made of mismatched boards. No paint. No windows. The roof was low and covered with old sheet metal. There were nails sticking out all over, some bent, some rusted. I stood behind a tree and stared at it. There was a blue plastic barrel beside the door, and an old wheelbarrow half buried in the dirt. No smoke, no sound. The door was closed, but I could see that it didn't sit right in the frame, like it had been forced a few times. There were more boot prints around it, some going in, fewer coming out. I didn't go near it. I turned and walked the opposite direction, faster than before. My heart was hammering. I didn't know who had built that place or what it was used for, but I didn't want to find out. I kept moving, uphill now, pushing through thicker brush, not caring about scratches on my arms or face. Eventually, I came to a small rise. From the top, I could see a break in the trees, a faint line of something pale and straight. I moved toward it, crashing through undergrowth. When I reached it, I saw it was the road, just a 2-lane stretch of old asphalt, but it felt like the safest place I'd ever seen. My truck was still a long way off. I had come out maybe 2 miles down, but I didn't care. I started walking the edge of the road, watching the woods the whole time, listening for any sound behind me. I didn't hear anything. When I got back to the truck, I checked the locks. Nothing touched. The sun was lower now. I climbed in, turned the key, and drove straight home without stopping. Later that night, I thought about calling someone. The police maybe, but what would I say? That I found a pile of burned clothes and a shack? That I saw boot prints? I didn't even know where exactly I had been. There were no trail markers, no way to describe the location. And honestly, I didn't want to go back out there to try and find it again. I've never told anyone about it in person. Never went back to that part of the woods. And now, every time I pass a patch of forest that doesn't have a sign or a trail or a fence, I wonder if there's another shack like that somewhere inside. Another pile. Another wire strung between trees. Sometimes I think about how quiet it was and how whoever left those boot prints had been watching. Maybe not the whole time, but long enough. Long enough to know I was out there alone.